I am going to rip back, but I should not have done the bust shaping. We're gonna kind of nip this in. We're gonna lift this up a little bit. It's gonna be good. This is my sock. This is my sock. You know what? I don't even care. There's lots of whips, but they all have a purpose, and I'm having a good time, so.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. I don't know why, sometimes I just feel a little rusty, but I do feel like I have a lot to talk to you about today. We have what should be a finished object, but what is actually probably going to wind up being frogged. We have a couple of returning whip, as well as two new cast-ons, one that you may have been anticipating and one that was a surprise to me. So I think that we should just go ahead and dive on in. So I'm essentially going to go a little bit out of order from what I usually do. I would typically start with the whip that's been on my needles the longest. However, like I said, I have what should be a finished object. Unfortunately, it's not. And so I would like to talk about that first and kind of where things went wrong. So we are going to be talking today about my Tulsa tank, which is by Rebecca Clow of the Crayabea. I knit this actually with the combination of the Tulsa cami as well as the Tulsa vest. So I had knit the front neckline shaping of the cami, and then the back is actually the back shaping for the vest. And this is where things are at. So this looks pretty much like a finished object. And if this was doing everything I wanted it to, it is done according to the pattern. So the design for the cami does not have any finishes on the edges. And so this should technically be done. Now, I am going to show you the before and after blocking clips for this tank cami, and we're going to talk about a few things where this just sort of went wrong. So let me start by telling you the size that I knit this in. Originally, I had thought that I would be knitting this in a size 5, and that was based off of my measurements and the fact that I was getting gauge on the recommended needle size, which I believe is a 5mm needle. However, I had originally cast it on with a 4.5mm needle because the gauge that I was getting was just a little bit open, and I was essentially between the two sizes. So I thought that I could kind of kill two birds, one stone with that idea. Cast on with the size 5 on 4.5mm needles, and realized that I had twisted my cast on edge. So after a couple of inches, I actually had to start over, which was good because I was then actually able to kind of really lay out that full circumference and see how it was looking, and it did look pretty big to me. So I decided to size down to the size 4, at which point I had a lot of people suggesting that if you're between the two sizes, why don't you size down? And then the pattern includes bust shaping. So you could size down for the body of this, but then do the bust shaping to really accommodate all of the things that need to work. And I thought that that was a perfect idea. Now, the only reason I hadn't originally planned to do the bust shaping is because she tells you it's based on your measurements whether or not you're going to need bust shaping at all. And then furthermore than that, like how much bust shaping. So you are to measure your full bust and your upper bust. I believe that's what it is. And then if there was a difference of more than 2 inches between those two numbers, then you should knit with the bust shaping. Now, I happened to literally hit that 2-inch mark, and so I felt like I could go kind of either way, no bust shaping or bust shaping. And so I went for the lazy route in the first place, which is why I wasn't planning to do bust shaping, but I thought it was a really good idea. So I did it, and I think that that's where I went wrong. Let me tell you how I finished out the rest of this sweater. I'm actually trying to even remember. I last week had not split for the front and back yet. So since we spoke, I actually think that just after filming last week, I only knit another like 2 rounds or so, and then was able to start the bust shaping, which is done by making increases. And there's a certain amount that you're supposed to do for your size in the pattern. And that sort of happens just under the bust so that it's kind of filling out, and then you're splitting for the front and back and then continuing. Now, I did that and it looked really nice. I actually like the look of the bust stars. I think that they give a nice little bit of just detail shaping, a little pointed shape. It looks really lovely. So that was fun and fine to do. If you're planning to knit this and you're feeling nervous about bust shaping, don't be at all. It's literally just adding an increase at the point specified in the pattern. I thought it was going to be some sort of involved process, which is part of why I didn't want to do it in the first place. But just know if you plan to knit this and you need the bust shaping, it is very simple to do. It's simply just increases. So don't worry about that. So then I had split for the front and back, at which point I followed the pattern for the cami on the front. And this is all done with like a slip stitch edge, which I think in my cotton yarn, which I didn't even say yet, this is a thrifted cotton yarn. I believe that the brand was called Alina, and it's a mercerized cotton. So I think that it's just there's something about the cotton that didn't like the slipped edge. It looks pretty undone to me. And maybe I'm also just learning that I don't like a raw edge. But I followed the exact pattern for that. I followed the exact pattern for the back of this, which is the back of the vest version. So it's just kind of a higher neck back. And the only issue is that from the back straps to the front straps, there was a 1-stitch difference. And I just did knit 2 together in the 3-needle bind off that you do at the shoulders. So on the last stitch of each of those seams, so you're knitting together the front and the back with a 3-needle bind off. On that last stitch, I just took the additional stitch that I had on the front versus the back and knit it together. So a little just, hack job there, but you'll never know in the end. And the back is part of the vest pattern, which means that it is supposed to have an edge to it. And so I kind of already predicted I would want to do like an I-cord or something, but I really wanted to block this before I figured all of that out. So I took the before blocking clips. Before I planned to do the bust darts, I did imagine the front and back being the 2 different shapes so that if I wanted to, I could maybe get away with having a reversible garment. And I was really pleased with the way that it was looking before blocking, in that even having done the bust shaping, I don't think that it looked like I was wearing it backwards when I had it on what is backwards. And I realized in retrospect, I maybe even should have just done the shaping for the front of the vest and worked that as the back. And so when the cami part was facing forward, the back would probably be a little bit more of a scoop, and that might be a little bit awkward. But actually, when I saw the way that this back of the vest looked on my front, I thought it was really pretty. It almost gave a boat neck type shape. So I was really happy with that. So I blocked this. This yarn bled like mad in the blocking mats. I actually would not even be surprised if from before and after blocking you could see a difference in color. I can't remember exactly if that's the case, but boy, did that yarn bleed in blocking. So this has been sitting on the blocking mats. I left it there a couple days. It's been pretty humid, so I didn't really want to dry. And because it is cotton, I didn't want to tamper with it while it was still damp at all. But yesterday I took it off of the blocking mats thinking that I could go ahead and just clean up the edges and all that. And then when I put this on, I realized that it wasn't fitting exactly the way that I wanted it to. And being that it is such a quick and easy knit, I mean, the once I reached that point of splitting for the underarms, the front, so the two cami triangles, that took me a few hours over the course of a day. And then the back was another few hours over the course of another day. So very quick knit. As of right now, with blocking and everything considered, it's been 12 days since I cast this on. So it is so quick that I think it would be really silly to leave it the way that it is right now because I don't love it. And because this is cotton, I think it's just going to stretch that much more. And what's kind of funny is, so putting it on, the back I think looks really nice when it's on the front or on the back. I think that works really well. The front, however, when I was wearing this, I started kind of just pinching the fabric. You know, I'm just going to throw it on top of what I have right now so I could show you what I had done. Because I actually was also going to just fix this yesterday, or at least rip it out. And I thought, no, I'm going to film tomorrow. So I'll just show you guys exactly what I'm kind of thinking here. So this won't be the most accurate since I have something else on underneath it. But when this was on bare skin, you could see that my triangles, they come out like so far. And I think this is where the bust shaping, if I had a fuller bust, this would obviously, this is a shot, this would obviously be kind of standing off of my body a bit more, in which case it would pull that fabric over. And this would probably be really great if you had a larger bust than I do. I don't have a particularly large bust, and that was why I wasn't going to do the bust shaping. But now that I have, I just feel like these triangles are way too wide. And then I'm also getting this gapping here. So what I was doing, I was looking in the mirror and I was kind of pinching and pulling the fabric. So I felt like, all right, if I were sewing this garment, right, it almost needs a dart like this. And folding that just automatically made things better. But even still, these triangles just come out so far on me. And so then I kind of started going like this, and automatically that just gives such a better fit and silhouette. You could see that the triangle isn't coming out quite as far. So when I did that, I pinched the fabric and stood it up in like these little tents. And I went and I counted from finger pinch to finger pinch. How many stitches did I have? And wouldn't you know, it's the exact amount that I increased for the bust shaping. So what that is telling me is that I should not have done the bust shaping, because had I had, now I can't remember if it's 8 or 10 stitches, but something like that, less in this little tent area, it would fit so much better. And so I now not only have to rip out the triangles in the front, but also the back, because those bust darts happen while you're still knitting in the round. And so I actually have, let's see, I will pinpoint the first dart if I can for you. Yep, right about here. This is where I have to rip the whole top out too, which, like I said, it's about 2 days of knitting for the front and the back, and it will be even less than that with less stitches. I just think it's so worth it, and especially now that I know I do want an edge on this, which I think I'm just going to do I-cord all around. I think that I don't want this being as wide as it is, and then also having an I-cord. I mean, that's just going to be ridiculous. So I am going to rip back all the way to before the bust starts. in doing so, I'm really happy with the length of the body on this. I think that that looks like really nice. So I'm not going to change anything about the body length. However, well, okay, that's wrong because I like the body length where it is right now. So I think I will actually probably knit it about an inch further in the body than I did this time around. Because once you've finished all of the shaping that goes into the front and the back of this, you are told to just knit basically however long you need to kind of get that armhole depth that you need. And it's just flat knitting. And I think that I could do with about an inch less on either side. And that would pull up the V-neck a touch because the V-neck is like just half an inch deeper than I want it to be. But again, it's going to stretch, it's cotton, and I'm going to have the I-cord, so that's all good. But I think about an inch less on either side would give me a little bit more of a shallow armhole already. I could tell that that's going to be better. But again, I just want you to see when I pull this out, which like, oh gosh, but this is just silliness. The fact that this goes all the way out to here. That's so unnecessary. So yes, have to rip back to before the bust starts, going to do the same thing that I had done for the cami shaping and the back of the vest shaping. And then I think actually the way that it's going to play out, I'm pretty sure that I had only just knit another inch straight in the fabric. Good news is I took some tallies of how many additional rows I had done. So I'm probably just going to omit those straight sort of back and forth after the shaping is all done. And that should work out. And then an I-cord edge, which I also think I'm going to follow the I-cord edge instructions from the Sailor Swift top because I liked the way that it laid a little bit more like a tape and a little bit less like a round cord. So that is what's going on with the Tulsa right now. And like I said, the good news is it's just such a quick knit. So it's worth it, I think, to take the time to fix it. So that's a big update on the Tulsa tank. Been on the needles for 12 days today. Been on the blocking mats for like 4 days today, but very quick knit, just not getting the fit quite right at the moment. And it's me more than anything. It's the fact that I have these specific measurements that fall in that in between area. And so I could have gone either way and I made the wrong choice and that's all right. So yeah, we're going to kind of nip this in. We're going to lift this up a little bit. It's going to be good. All right, so with that out of the way, we can go ahead and start talking about the actual whips that I knew were still going to be whips today. And we will go in order of how long they've been on the needles. So this is my Feel Good Cable Sweater by Anne Catherine Stoll. I am knitting this out of Barocco Ultra Wool Chunky, which is a superwash wool. And this project has been on my needles for 25 days today. Here we have her. It's really starting to look like something now. So I think since we spoke last, I would have done the other sleeve unless I've still just been working in the body and the rounds. Today I'm actually going to put a progress keeper on it because I want to remember for next time. But one of those things is true. So I am knitting this. It's an all over cabled sweater. The cables are these really chunky sort of braided style cables. So you have some that kind of twist in and then twist over. And I'm knitting this guy in the size large. However, I've modified it so that it's sort of being knit between the sizes medium and large as far as the actual circumference of this goes. And I have not gauge swatched or anything, so this is a gamble project. But the way that I modified it was that on the side, there are supposed to be these really wide spans of stockinette, and I decrease it significantly. I think I'm doing about a third of the size of what this panel should be in plain stockinette on the side. And then that also carries through on the sleeves. However, I then wound up going in and increasing in the sleeves because they're supposed to be this large bell shape. But right now, I'm gonna sneeze. Right now, where things are at, I am just trying to do as much in the body as I can. This is going to be an interesting one. I'm sorry, I have no idea how to hold this up right, but the this sweater is supposed to just be big everywhere. It's a large, oversized, cozy sweater. And so I feel like we're all very accustomed to knitting more cropped garments. And this one is intended to be way more oversized, over the bum, something that could certainly be worn with leggings or something like that in the winter. And so I'm just trying to like knit on the body as much as I possibly can before I'm sick of it. And I am kind of waiting to get more done in the body before I go back and check the length on the sleeves and everything like that. So the sleeves are not done, but they're about where I think that they should be, and they're finished off with a rolled hem. So I'm waiting to kind of see how everything else goes, as well as blocking this, because obviously there's going to be a lot of growth when this is blocked. But the number one thing that I wanted to talk to you about today with this is something that I know I mentioned last week, is that this is another sweater that is supposed to just have these raw edges. So this V-neck is intended to just be left as a raw edge. And that wasn't something that I realized when I saw the design. And I feel like I didn't do the best job of keeping the edges tidy, especially where I joined the two fronts together. And so I felt like I could benefit from a little bit of an edge on the neck, as well as the fact that it's a really wide V-neck. And because the whole sweater is going to be heavy and oversized, and I imagine I'll wear it kind of off my shoulder and stuff like that, I didn't want it to just grow over time. So I'm looking for something to finish the neck hole, but also to keep things cinched and a little bit more structured. And so I actually played around with 3 different options of edging in just small sections to kind of see what we thought. So the back of the neck is finished in the pattern with an I-cord edge. So that actually does have a clean edge on it. Then, like I said, the rest of the finishes are a rolled hem. So I kind of felt like it was going to be one or the other. I'll certainly include close-ups, but I'm not sure if you could see here. I've done 3 different samples of ways to finish. And so the first one that I had done was a rolled edge. And I actually just think I did too many rows on this rolled edge. So it looks like I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or I probably did 5 and then the bind off, and I just did a standard bind off. And I think that this is rolling a little too much for the neckline, where it's just going to look a little sloppy. The next one that I had done was literally just knit down and back, so just 2 rows, and then the bind off, which I think looks better than the first rolled edge. And then the last thing that I had done was the I-cord, which is certainly the most tidy, structured, polished. Upon looking at it, I do really want your opinion, because I'm going to pick one of the 3. I'm going to turn this around so I can see it. I actually am really torn between the small rolled edge, so literally just 2 rows of stockinette and a bind off, and then the I-cord edge. Reason being is I do feel like the I-cord edge kind of is a little bit more bulky, a little bit more bulbous, and it might distract from the cables a little bit. But then the rolled edge, it looks nice. It looks nice. I just don't know if a rolled edge on a neckline is something that I really want. Maybe I should try one more option of literally just picking up the stitches and then binding them off, just to get that sort of just more clean edge, but still sort of unfinished looking. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about that. Let me know what you think of these options that I have here, and we'll see which one I wind up picking, because I definitely want to do that before I finalize the length of the hem, the length of the sleeves, and everything. So that is something I want to get to pretty soon. This project is knit up on 6mm needles, and so at this point it really is just following the chart as you go. I've memorized the chart. I'm using a row counter to make sure where is the row counter? Just to follow the chart in the rounds, and it's knit in the knits, purl in the purls for most rows, except for the 2 cable rows that I have to pay attention to. So I'll just be doing that for the next little bit, which is why I just felt like this was now getting to a point where it was a little bit monotonous. And the 6mm needles are not my favorite in my hands. They're a little bit of a chunky needle for me, so I can't work on this for too long without feeling like I need to take a break. So yeah, I've just thrown in a progress keeper here. I won't bother to try this on because I'm certain that it's not going to be ready to bind off even by next week. And so I'll just keep working on the body on this. And if you guys could just let me know what your thoughts are for the neckline here, I would really appreciate your opinion because I'm feeling very torn about it. So I think at this point, the options really are the 2 rows of stockinette, then bind off, rolled hem, the I-cord edge, or should I introduce another option where I just pick up and then bind off? Let me know what you think. That's a Feel Good Cable Sweater by Anne Catherine Stoll. It's been on the needles today for 25 days. Next up, I'm going to tell you about both a project that I cast on as well as a swatch that I made because I'm trying to welcome myself back to my swatching era. And so I have a little bit of a story here. If you've been here before, you might remember that a few weeks ago, I had picked up some of this Sandnes Garn Sunday, the petite knit version in this colorway, Rust. It was on sale, and I really want to knit this up into I think I'm settling on a Sailor Swift top for this one instead of a Tulsa, which I was kind of just torn between the two. And I really wanted to swatch for that. So I did. And just like I had talked about with my last Sailor Swift top that I knit, I wanted to play around with the gauge with that project and kind of get a better sense for how I would like it knit up. And so I did knit this gauge on 2.5mm needles. And when I tell you that I'm obsessed with the way that this fabric looks, I really am. Even when I stretch it, I'm not getting a ton of holiness. And so I am really eager to have this in a sort of mimicking the top that I have on. Oh. Something that sort of mimics the top that I have on right now, where it's a little bit more of a high neck. And that's why I'm leaning towards the Sailor Swift top. That being said too, if you recommend a high neck tank that is not the Sailor Swift top and also not the popular one from My Favorite Things Knitwear, if you have a recommendation for one that is just simple stockinette, I'd love to know what you would do. But I knit up this swatch, and it was so on Saturday night, we had a soccer game to watch, and I always love to knit while we're watching soccer. And I didn't have anything that was stockinette in the round to work on because the Tulsa tank was blocking. And I just said I was going to be a swatcher. And so I knit up this swatch on Saturday and was really pleased with myself that I had done that. But I wasn't going to be able to then block and cast this on Saturday. Plus, if I wanted to do the Sailor Swift top, it was going to start from the top down, which means that it wasn't going to be anywhere near the in the round knitting that I was craving for soccer watching. And so I made an executive decision to still swatch with this, have that waiting for me, and I did. But then cast on something else without swatching as sort of like a sacrificial stockinette round project in order to actually preserve the yarn that I've invested a little bit in. So I turned to my stash and tried to find anything that I could just start a Tulsa tank. Because the one really nice thing about the Tulsa tank, I don't have a firm opinion on how I feel about that pattern just yet, based on how the fit is that I got. Also, I forgot to mention, I did notice just a couple of very minor errors in the pattern, and I'm going to reach out to Rebecca Clow and just let her know. I mean, it's very silly things like saying right side when it should be wrong side, but it definitely interrupts the smooth knitting process when you're kind of second guessing those things. And then it makes you feel like you're doubting other parts of the pattern. And so for those reasons, I was like, on the Tulsa tank so far. But what I really love is the fact that it's hit the ground running knitting and that you can cast on and work your way up from the bottom. So if you just need something to start right now, you can, because it is bottom up. So I went stash diving for anything that I could knit into a Tulsa tank, and I came across this red yarn. This is Drops Fable. And you may recognize it if you've seen my Christmas dress, which I knit out of this and then the Drops brushed alpaca silk last year. So I had a few balls of this kicking around left over, and I figured it was a great way to use up some stash just to knit up another little tank top. The only thing is that for this Tulsa, I'm looking for something that has 0 ease to negative ease, and I am also maybe gonna just start doing my own thing after getting those initial numbers. So this was what I cast on without swatching to preserve this knit as a, fully investigative, swatched, prepared knit. I didn't want to just get this on the needles for the sake of getting something on the needles. So this we're doing the right way, this we are not. That being said, I have now been working on this little Tulsa tank, so another Tulsa, kind of, for 5 days as of today, and I decided to go ahead and cast this on those 2.5 millimeter needles as well. So within that Tulsa tank pattern, it's such a versatile pattern. You have the options for a cami, a cami, crew neck, a cami, a vest, and a square neck. So V-neck, crew neck, square neck. And you also have the option for DK weight or fingering weight. And so this being fingering weight, I'm kind of planning to follow the pattern for the vest in the 4-ply is what it's called. Now, because of what I just said basically about the Sailor Swift and all of that stuff, I really did want something that wasn't going to be too gapey when I knit it up. And so I went for the 2.5 millimeter needles. Still went for a size 4 based on the way that the size 4 in the DK weight version was fitting me, the different measurements in the fingering weight. And the goal is to have something that kind of just fits, again, kind of like what I'm wearing right now. Now, I cast on and immediately started doing 2x2 rib because there was a world in which I thought I was going to rib the entire cami, and pretty quickly felt like that was crazy on 2.5 millimeter needles to do an entirely 2x2 knit rib cami. No. And because the other thing that I kind of reasoned with myself is that this isn't actually like a highly desired finished object for me. This is going to be now what I would consider what other people do is sock knitting. This is going to be the project that is just hanging out for when I need it. This is lowest priority in the whole thing. But if there's nothing else that I could work on that's just stockinette in the round, that's mindless knitting, and that's what I'm really craving, then I have this there for me. And that is also why I decided the 2.5 millimeter needles, because I didn't want something that was going to be a quick knit. I didn't want to have to figure out another stockinette in the round project in a week. And that was how I felt with the other Tulsa tank. So I went for the fingering weight. I went for the 2.5 millimeter needles. I did not gauge swatch for this. I will probably try this on in a week or 2, depends on how much work I get done on it, just to make sure that it's going to fit. But it's also really just not about that. It'll be nice if I come out of this with a finished object, but I kind of don't care. Now, I will say that this being a sock yarn, the Drops Fable, it is a little bit more of an itch factor than the Knitting for Olive Merino, which I had knit the Sailor Swift top out of. That's very soft next to skin. This I'm noticing is a bit of an itch. We'll see how it feels when it's more blocked out. But again, I'm really just picturing this as something to have for knitting in the round. The yarn came from Stash. It's Drops yarn, so it's very affordable. And so this is just a fun little side project to have when I need it. 0 priority. And really, it was just something that I could say, I need something or I want something to knit on while watching this game tonight. And so I don't want to bypass my desire to gauge swatch for that Sunday yarn. And so it was like, sacrifice this yarn, do things properly for the Sunday yarn, and you'll just have to wait to cast that on a little bit later. And I think I'm okay with that. So I don't know how often this is going to make an appearance. At the moment, I'm assuming that I will be working on this weekly when we watch our soccer games, but we'll see. It may never even get done. I don't know. This is my sock. This is my sock. So that is the Tulsa Tank Crew vest 4-ply, size 4, 2.5 millimeter needles. Been on the needles now for 5 days. Okay, now let's talk about what I really want to talk about. I did cast on my first like very official summer knit. I know I have summer knits, but this is what's screaming summer to me right now. And that is with the Nora. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think people said it was pronounced Asaginu or Asaginu. I'm going to say Asaginu because that feels a little bit more natural. So Asaginu yarn. It's a Japanese paper and French linen blend yarn. I do talk all about this in the video that I actually just put up this week, which was my summer knitting plans. You can hear me talk way more about this. But last week I showed you I had swatched with this yarn. I also seam blocked it since we spoke last. So let me show that to you first. This is the steam blocked swatch. This yarn is dry clean only. And so I blocked it with a good steam and just gave it a little bit of a press. And boy, was that the most satisfying thing I have ever seen. I wish that I got a better shot of this swatch last week just so that you could really see the difference since I steamed it, but it just softens up this fabric so much more. It is a paper linen blend, so it certainly is still quite like you can kind of see it stands on its own a little bit, but it's way more fluid, especially vertically. So this is the stitches going this way, and you can see it wants to kind of stand up. And then if I do it the other way, it's way more drapey, way more fluid. So I'm so in love with how this fabric looks. I am holding on to this swatch on the try it on tubing because I may wind up needing this yarn. And so I did want to actually like play around with this swatch a little bit and play around with getting it wet and just to see how it behaves, but I might wind up needing the yarn. So for now, I'm just going to keep it on this tubing because I don't want to destroy it if I need the yarn. So this is my swatch for the vest Claire, which is a pattern by Mochi Knits. It is a little button-up vest for the summer. You could also do tie fronts, but it's just a sweet kind of trendy little vest that I'm very excited to have so many versions of for the summer. And so that is what this swatch is for. Now, my gauge in this swatch is 25 stitches by 32 rows, when the called for gauge in the Vest Claire pattern is 25 stitches by 37 rows. So this stitch gauge was shockingly on. However, that row gauge was off. And of course, that's kind of the more complicated thing to adjust in a vest pattern specifically, because it's really determining the length of the armhole depth and all of that. So I have been doing some math in order to work this project up, but I have accepted it because I'm getting the exact fabric that I want for this vest and for this garment. So I think it's worth it to go the extra mile of just making those little adjustments. So I cast this on yesterday. Actually, once I thought I was going to be doing finishes on the Tulsa tank, and that didn't happen, but I was kind of just over working in the round on the Feel Good cable sweater. I felt like it was a good time to get this started. So yes, I cast this on literally yesterday, and this is what I have. It's going to be so tricky to show because this is like the curliest yarn you've ever seen when it's worked up, but it is knit from the top down, and you start with the back panel. So what I'm holding up here is the back panel, and you kind of start with either shoulder. There's some short row shaping and then casting on the stitches between and working flat. So I'm knitting this in the size extra large and on 3.5 millimeter needles. Now, the reason I might need that swatch is I think that I was looking at the wrong number or something when I bought the yarn. I bought it specifically to knit the other vest. That's what I did. Yeah, okay, so I actually bought the yarn to knit a different vest that I talk about in my summer knitting plans, and then realized I would prefer it for this vest. So I might be a little bit short on yarn, and we'll just have to see as we go. But this, oops. So yeah, I'm knitting this in the size extra large on the 3.5 millimeter needles. Those are the recommended needles. And at the moment, I am knitting flat back and forth until I reach the point where it is supposed to start doing the shaping for the underarm. And so I just did some cross multiplication algebra stuff and was able to figure out when the pattern says to knit X amount of rows, I am knitting X amount of rows based on the fact that her 32 rows is my 37 rows, or the other way. Yes, my 32 is her 37. So I just had to math things out a little bit. For the back, it's actually way more simple because there's not a lot of like V-neck shaping, increasing stuff going on. So I don't have to figure out anything really too intense for that. There's one spot on this back part where I'm going to have to just sneak in another increase in a row, but I think very doable. And yeah, we're just going to have to kind of play this one by ear, work through as we go, figure out all those little hurdles. And so the back panel is my main priority right now. What's kind of cool is that because this yarn does not like grow in blocking, in fact, what I figured out is more than anything, the stitches kind of sit a little more as far as looking at the fabric. The stitches sit pretty narrow and a little bit skinny and tall. And then doing the steaming and that light pressing, it kind of squishes the stitches. And so they just sit flatter and therefore a little bit wider. So it's not growing, it's just sort of compressing a little bit. And so when I hold this up right now, you're actually getting a pretty good sense of the fit on this because it's really not growing in blocking. And so I think that that's really a great fit for the back of this little vest. And I'm just so excited. Honestly, even though this has just been back and forth knitting for the most part after doing the short row shaping at the top, it's been so engaging because of the fabric. Because the way that as you add weight and more rows to this fabric, it just starts really becoming something. It's so addicting to knit up. And I haven't been able to put it down since I cast it on yesterday. It's just too much fun to play with this fabric. So that's where I'm at. I'm actually very close to the point where I'm supposed to start the armhole shaping. I think I have something like 10 more rows or so to do. And that looks kind of like it's checking out as far as where things are laying. So the time I've done the like 10 more rows and then start with the shaping, I think we should be good. So that's where this is at project wise. Like I said, cast it on yesterday. I wanted to say on the pattern. So this is Mochi Knits. I've never knit anything by Mochi Knits, and holy how do I love the formatting of this pattern. I want to see if I could show you what I really love so much. There's, first of all, she lists all of the finished garment measurements with the schematic. So that's really great, especially because of my situation where I have to kind of play around with my row gauge and stuff. I can see right in that original schematic and finished garment measurements, make sure everything's working out accordingly. But then what's even better is where they have all of the different abbreviations, they also have helpful links for all of these different techniques that you talk about in the pattern. So really, really helpful. Then also a small schematic when you're doing German short rows, just showing you like what that looks like. If you've never knit German short rows, it's so intimidating. And so to see it laid out like that is just really helpful. And more than that, this is the part that I really wanted to show you. So let me find a bit where I could kind of do this without showing the rest of the pattern. After each step that's kind of critical in the shaping of things, they actually add another schematic where you could see, she's like, this is what it should look like right now. This is the shape of what's happening. This is the way that the yarn is going. And that's just so helpful to minimize the guessing game of all of it. So I absolutely adore the way that this pattern is written up. And I've gone through and I've skimmed a little bit more through the rest of it because I've learned that that's what I'm supposed to do, to not mess too many things up after the fact. But there's photos of techniques in here on exactly what's supposed to be happening, on, how to knit the edges down and how to add your buttons in, all of these different really great things. There's a chart that literally shows you how to read a chart. So I don't know that I would suggest this particular pattern as like a beginner. I mean, not as like your first ever knit. I think that there might just be a lot going on. But if you've knit something up, if you've knit up a stockinette sweater, and you're looking for something that has short rows, for something that's maybe knitting flat, something, before you get into knitting a cardigan, if you want to try something that's knit flat but has, the shaping and that sort of stuff of the cardigan without having to deal with the sleeves. As of right now, I just think that this pattern is written so beautifully, and I would highly, highly recommend it. I'll definitely be looking at other designs. They have actually another very similar vest to the Claire vest, and it's a slightly different gauge. It's a slightly different fit. And so if you're interested in knitting one of these summer vests, she has a couple of options there to choose from, but I'm definitely going to be looking for other knits as well, because the way that the pattern is written, it's incredibly intuitive. And if I'm comparing it to the other things that I have on the needles right now, I feel like the Tolsta is kind of, there's so much packed into one pattern, and so that's really what you're getting. But then the actual pattern is formatted a little bit minimally and maybe a pinch to its detriment, where it's like it's just a lot of information right in front of you, and also none at all. So not crazy about that. My first Rebecca Clow pattern, the Feel Good Cable sweater, has very minimal information. So it is straight to the point, but I do feel like it lacks a little bit of fluff. So I feel like I wish it had a little more explanation at some points. So not crazy about that. And then this pattern, really, of the things that I have on the needles right now, takes the cake for just a beautifully written pattern. Reminds me very much of Knitting Up Anything by Knitonomy, Magdalena Parker. She has a really great format and video links built right into the pattern, so I love that. As well as the Sailor Swift top, or anything Veronica Lindbergh, I've found very clear, straight to the point. So right now, if I actually had to rank the most clear, coherent patterns that I've followed, some of them, they would be by those three designers. So that's Knitonomy, Magdalena Parker, Mochi Knits, which I'm working on right now, and Veronica Lindbergh. If you're looking for just really clearly written patterns, those are the three that I'm saying are my top right now. So yeah, that's where we're at with this. Honestly, I was just so excited to get to knitting this after editing the whole summer knits video. I felt like I had held out long enough and I just wanted to get this on my needles. And it was just a good time with the Tulsa and everything. So I have way more whips on the needles right now, especially considering the fact that I'm not even showing you a couple of them because they're sort of in hibernation. Um, and so we got to figure that out a little bit, especially there's yarn on the way for other things. I'm just very excited about summer knitting at the moment. And so it just feels good to be knitting up some summer stuff. You know what? I don't even care. There's lots of whips, but they all have a purpose and I'm having a good time. So, um, yeah, cast this on yesterday. It's rocking and rolling. If you do want to laugh with me, this yarn, the paper, it's so tricky to figure out a good system for actually knitting it up. It comes on one of those little cardboard tubes. And so maybe if you had one of those yarn spindly things where you just kind of like put it on the spindle and then it like twists while you work, or one of those ones that like hang off of your wrist, that'd probably be a good system for this. However, I don't have one of those, and so I wanted to just cake it up, and that was proving to be very difficult. So then I remembered that that's when people utilize a sort of yarn cozy to hold all of the yarn in, and I don't have one of those either and have no interest in making one anytime soon. However, what I do have are a bunch of socks that I don't wear because my mom gets me socks for Christmas every year, and I tell her I only wear black and white socks. I'm very boring in that way, but she still buys me colorful socks, and that's very nice, but I don't really wear them. So I had a purple one that I don't wear, and so I stuck my little yarn cake into here to keep it contained. And so far, this is working out really well, and I'll even show you. When I'm not putting it away in a project bag, what I've actually been doing is then just sticking the needles kind of inside of that and just sitting this on the table while I'm away. So another broke girl hack. We'll keep them coming. That's the Vest Claire. It's confusing. It says Vest Claire, but then it also says Claire Vest. Like the head of the pattern says Claire Vest, but the Ravelry page says Vest Claire. So I'm going to go back and forth between the two. I don't know what it's actually called. But for Ravelry's sake, it's Vest Claire by Mochi Knits. Nora Asagi new yarn since yesterday. Okay. Wow, we made it. Those are all of the projects that I had to talk to you guys about today. I knew I had a lot to say. It's just, how many times have I said it on here that it's all or nothing. It's either everything's going kind of chaotic or everything's done. So I actually feel like there's a good balance, at least, of there being things in between and all of that. So the plans for the next week are to rip out the Tulsa, redo that, hopefully get that done for next week just to kind of get it done. I'd love to find out at least which technique I'm going to use on that neckline of the Feel Good cable sweater. So I'd love to know your opinion on that. The Vest Claire, I would not be surprised if that gets way more work done than anything else because I'm just loving it at the moment. And then the red Tulsa fingering vest thing, that is just going to be there for when I need it. So it's probably going to get worked on a little bit this weekend while we watch some soccer. So those are the plans. And then the only other thing is, like I said, I did put out a midweek video this week. That was the summer knitting plans. And it's been, as of today that I'm filming, I put it out yesterday, and you guys have been really loving it, and that makes me so happy, for all the reasons that I discussed in the video. So thank you so much to those of you who have watched it. If you haven't, even if you are not into summer knitting, I think that we chat about a lot of just sort of knitting slump type things and organizing my thoughts on knitting, and so I think it's worth the watch. And yeah, I think that is all I have for you today. Also, we've welcomed in the summer theme now that the summer knitting plans actually got up. So I hope you guys are enjoying the beachy vibes that we're trying to bring over here until the end of September, which really shouldn't be summer anymore, but we're going to pretend. So with that, If you enjoyed this video, if you like knitting content in general, I would very much appreciate it if you would go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. If you subscribe and ring the bell, then you'll definitely be notified anytime I post a new video, just like that summer knitting plans video I put out earlier this week. However, you can always be sure to see a podcast video on Saturday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. With all that being said, big ol' thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, you guys. Bye!